Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record information, Representative Jaron Crane, District 12 in Nampa. So this is House Bill 753. I'm going to walk through a couple of the highlights, but before I get into the highlights of the bill, I want to address the updated fiscal note. If you look at the green sheet, you're going to see this legislation will require fiscal year 2024 supplemental appropriation of $250,000 and a $1 million fiscal year 2025 one-time appropriation to aid in county governments and enforcement costs. There's going to be enforcement costs for law enforcement associated with this legislation, but those costs cannot be reliably predicted at this point because of the uncertain nature and extent of the potential enforcement activities. When we look at the legislation, we're going to be creating a new crime, and that new crime is going to be known as illegal entry. There's going to be two different penalties for that. A first-time offense is going to be a misdemeanor. A second-time offense is going to be a felony. The way in which this will work, this will allow local law enforcement agents to go ahead and act as the border security of our state. So according to Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, it is our right and it is our duty to protect the borders of this state when the federal government has failed its sovereignty and its responsibility to do so. So we have constitutional provision. When we look at, I had a conversation with a colleague this morning, and man, this bill's coming kind of late, isn't it? And I said, actually, yeah, you're right, and I will own that. What I've been looking for this entire session is across the United States, state legislatures to pass some kind of legislation that's going to get upheld in the Supreme Court. This just came in the last few weeks. Texas Senate Bill 4 was passed in the fall of last year in a special session, and it just had the Texas Supreme Court upheld it. And this bill is what we're going to use as the model here for Idaho. So recently, as I addressed in the introduction yesterday, there has been a stay by an appellate court in Texas on that. That doesn't mean this legislation is no longer constitutionally sound. So we were waiting for something to come forward that we could model after, and this seems to be the legislation that's going to do that. So we have also an interesting point. Is that there are three ports of entry in Idaho. There's one in Boise, there's one in Eastport, Idaho, and there's one in Port Hill, Idaho. So we have an issue at the Canadian border from northern Idaho where people are coming in that border, as well as we have the southern border issue. So the goal of this legislation is to close down the borders, use our law enforcement that's already in place. These guys know how and what to do. This allows them to ask some questions that they need to ask to find out if someone is here as an illegal alien. You'll see the definition of alien on page 1, and then be able to process accordingly. They then go before a magistrate, and the magistrate's going to ask them, would you like to go ahead and leave, or are you going to stay? And if they stay and this happens again, they're going to be facing a felony. If they leave, they're going to be a misdemeanor, and then they would be tried if they came back in as a re-entry. And you'll see that on pages 2 and 3, the part about re-entry. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for a question.
Thank you. Are there questions? Representative Barbieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Crane, do you envision this legislation empowering law enforcement to ask for IDs for everyone else in the car besides the driver?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Barbieri. I don't see that happening. I think that law enforcement is going to do their due diligence. There was a situation where one of our colleagues had a family member hit in an accident, and the person who hit that family member was an illegal immigrant. This would allow them the opportunity to say, hey, when we're going through this process of the accident, they can go ahead and ask for their information. Oh, you don't have any information. Okay, and now we can start the process of finding out if they're here legally or not. I know for my wife, this happened 2 years ago at the Walmart on 12th Avenue. She was being stalked by some people from another country. She called 911. They came down there, and they escorted my wife out to her car and our daughter. And he went over, and the law enforcement agent went to talk to these folks, and they no longer could speak English conveniently. So he couldn't do anything, and he couldn't ask them for any information or documentation. And so he was like, guys, you were about to be taken into human trafficking, but I can't prosecute because a crime hasn't happened yet, and I'm not allowed to ask for any kind of those documents. So this will allow them to answer your question. This will allow them to go ahead and say, I need to see some information about who you are.
It's like a Gestapo in Germany.
Mr. Chairman. Representative, what I'm asking is, are there provisions, statutory provisions already in place that would prevent an officer from trying to enforce this scheme, this schematic of proposed amendments or proposed new law? Are there provisions in place that will keep an officer from asking for identifications for those that are not involved in an accident? Lawful stop, but now we've got other individuals in the vehicle. Will this empower them, or are there statutes in place that will keep that from happening?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Barbieri. Yes, this will empower them. Sorry, I missed your question the first go around, but yes, this will help them be able to do that.
Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Crane. So, if a person is found to be illegally in Idaho under this bill, what is the process then? I mean, I understand a misdemeanor, but then is the person escorted to the state border, the Oregon border, or what? What happens then?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Gannon. It is in the legislation. What it requests is that they go to their country that they came from. Most oftentimes, what we're seeing in the last couple years is that they're coming through Mexico, but they may be coming from Haiti. They may be coming from China. There's been identified that 20,000 Chinese military-age males have made their way to this country, some of them of which are actually in the state of Idaho. So they will have to go to their country of origin of which they fled.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Crane. So, but how does the state of Idaho have jurisdiction to do that? I mean, we control, ISP can work within the borders of our state, but ISP can't. How would you get that person to go back to another country?
Representative Crane.
So on page 2, line 34, you're going to see for purposes of this section, removal includes an order issued pursuant to section 19603 Idaho Code or any other agreement which an alien stipulates to remove pursuant to criminal proceedings pursuant to either the federal or state law. The judge is actually going to make the decision for them to return. They're going to have a choice to make. If they wanted to stay in the state of Idaho, they're going to be now on the record. We're going to have their information. You're going to see in here there's provisions for law enforcement to document them. A lot of these folks are undocumented, so we don't have any fingerprints. We don't have an identification. They're not even in a registry. They came here illegally. So they are going to document them. Now they're documented. If they choose to stay in the state of Idaho, the next time they are caught, it's a felony. So if they want to run that risk and play that game, they can, but they have a decision to make.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other question, and Representative Crane. So, the Fifth Circuit is this bill identical to the Texas bill that is before the Fifth Circuit now, in which the Fifth Circuit has issued a stay order in its enforcement?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Gannon. It is identical, except to the point at which it applies to Idaho's departments or jurisdictions, if that makes sense. We're using Idaho State Police. But yes, it's an Idaho version of that Senate bill.
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Crane. So, in your statement of in your fiscal note, don't we need to include some expenses for legal proceedings? Because I would think that the same issue would come up here in the Ninth Circuit that came up in the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit's more conservative, generally viewed as being more conservative than the Ninth Circuit. So it sounds like we're going to have considerable litigation.
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Gannon. Thank you for that. What I did in the assessment on the fiscal note is we're going to appropriate a fund, and we don't know the extent into which, and you're going to see that in here, those potential enforcement activities take place. But we have allocated an amount, and if we have exhausted that amount, then we've exhausted that amount. But we've got to do something. And if it's $250,000 for fiscal year 2024, once that money is gone, that money is gone. And then we have a reappropriation. We're looking at $1 million for fiscal year 2025. So we will be using that fund for this protection of Idaho's borders.
Representative Allgood.
Yes, technical question on the wording. If you look at page 1, lines 30 and 31, It says, if the person enters or attempts to enter this state directly from a foreign nation. So my question would be, if they crossed in Texas, they were in the United States for a year or so, and come into Idaho, does that meet that directly requirement, in your opinion?
Representative Crane.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Allgood, to me it did. If they went straight to Arizona or they went straight to Idaho or they went straight to Texas, they came directly from their country. So I did not see an issue with that language, no.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Keelys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Crane, so I got a chance this morning to review the original Texas bill on which you mirrored this. So the definitions are the same as the Texas bill. All the wording around illegal entry from a foreign nation is the same as the Texas bill. But you omitted, I think, an important part of the Texas bill, which is 5B01, which prohibits a peace officer from enforcing this law in schools, churches, synagogues, temples, etc. Do you think it's okay to enforce this legislation in a church?
Representative Crane.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Keelys, when I talked to LSO, that is already an Idaho statute, so that's been omitted because that's Idaho statute currently.
Okay.
Is there a
No further
reference
questions?
to it? Sorry, follow up,
You need
Mr.
to go
Chairman.
through the
if I may?
chair, Representative.
I will. Thank you.
I know this is sensitive, and it got
I'm
emotional.
sensitive. I'm just trying to understand the law, Mr. Chairman. So could I follow up?
Chair's not going to recognize you. We're going to move on to public testimony. Next up will be Juliana Donnelly Zool.
Can you believe that, Mr. Crane? This is the father of the other Crane. Can you believe that he did that?
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
You
Good morning,
witnessed it.
committee. I'm Julianne Donnelly Zool, representing the ACLU of Idaho, in strong opposition to HB 753. For 3 reasons, I'm going to speak about the impacts to humanity, all the people who are your constituents, who are residents of the state of Idaho. I'm going to talk a little bit about the text of the bill, and I'm going to contest the sponsor's characterization of it. The descriptions that you gave are candidly not quite accurate to the text of the bill itself.
Hold on. Yep. Just a second. Let me pause your timer here. Representative Palmer.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to be politely object to what you just did. You need to the committee, not to the representative sitting next to you. Just trying.
Sure.
I know it's not easy, but in this sensitive position, we need to be careful.
Yep. Keep your remarks to the bill, and I'm not going to start your timer for a while because you lost a little bit of time there. So go ahead.
All right. I will also be speaking to the state of the law.
Okay.
So, first on humanity. People who are here in the state of Idaho are human beings. If you recall, a few months ago, there was a disastrous accident at the airport where people who were working very hard to maintain the infrastructure of our community died in the collapse of a hangar. The people who died in that collapse were gentlemen from Guatemala. They were here providing a need that we had. They had families that depend on them. And by working in a high-risk position, they lost their lives for it. This is not uncommon. Also, in the collapse of the Baltimore Bridge just a few days ago, other workers lost their lives. They were construction workers who were working through the night to fill the potholes on that bridge. They were from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Mexico. These are all individuals that are contributing positively to our communities, families with children. On the textual interpretation of the bill, on page 1, line 31, it does say, a person who is an alien commits an offense if the person enters or attempts to enter this state, Idaho. There is no other state that we are talking about, directly from a foreign nation. So while it has been described by the sponsor that this bill would apply to people who are of unauthorized status all across the state, that's simply not complete or accurate or matching of the text. I would also say that, noting the time.
I'll give you a
Excuse
couple
me,
more
Mr. Chair.
seconds.
On the law from the Fifth Circuit, which is hardly a bastion of liberal thinking, it is one of the most cautious and careful and conservative courts in the country. They recently held, citing 7 Supreme Court decisions, that power to control immigration is exclusively a federal power. This is not going to survive litigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Julian. My question was your comments on the Boise airport accident. Has that been confirmed that those were illegal aliens in our country?
Julianne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Scott, I'm not speaking to their immigration status, whether authorized or unauthorized. I'm pointing out that immigrants are an important part of our community, no matter the status.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank
Next
you.
up will be Robert Gillis. State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Mr. Chairman Committee, Robert Gillis from Idaho Tough on Crime. I've testified in front of this committee before and others about my law enforcement experience. I won't beat a dead horse. Specific to this bill, I think that we're all seeing what's going on across our country right now. I've testified about it before regarding issues that have occurred with one of our deputies that was shot and killed down in LA by a illegal immigrant that fled back to Mexico. It took us 5 years to get him back. Kate Steinle was murdered in San Francisco, another well-documented murder by an illegal immigrant. There was a police officer killed in Newman, California, shot and killed on a traffic stop by a Mexican illegal immigrant. There was an officer that was shot and killed in Houston by an illegal immigrant recently. There was one that was hit and killed by a DUI driver recently in Washington State. There was another one hit and killed in Florida by an illegal immigrant, a trooper. We saw Laken Riley. She was just murdered while she was jogging in Georgia. We saw a off-duty peace officer stabbed in the neck on a flight, an Alaska flight from Seattle to Las Vegas. We've seen New York police officers beaten down by mobs of illegal immigrants in New York. The National Guard is currently deployed there because of these illegal immigrants. This is not work visa type people that are working on a hangar by the airport. This is not people that are lawfully seeking work visas to operate in our country to provide for their families. These are criminals. There's a reason why there were tunnels that were constantly in the news from Tijuana to San Diego. Every week we were talking about them. The Sinaloa drug cartel, the New Jalisco Generation cartel, both were using those tunnels. Both of those cartels operate in our state of Idaho right now. They don't talk about the tunnels anymore because they just go straight across the border. They're in trucks, they're on panga boats, they're in vehicles, they're running across. This is a major, major issue for our state. We are all border states. Idaho is a border state. We need to protect it, and that's my final testimony.
Thank you, Robert. Are there questions for Robert? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Next up will be Holly Beach. Holly, are you here? Got you signed up in person? If not, Rick Nearabout.
Pretty quick on the draw, aren't you, Crane?
Permission to provide written testimony to the committee?
Absolutely. So Paige, Silas, you want to go grab his information? Make sure that gets distributed.
I believe there's enough there.
Ready?
Can we allow him to?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We'll just.
Sorry, I referenced it a couple times.
Nope, no problem at all. We'll just wait until that gets passed out. Okay. Do you have any more of those?
Oh, yes.
I think we're going to need some more. I've got 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 more. Rick.
Apologies.
No problem at all. Okay. State your name, who you represent. You have 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Nearabout, executive with Idaho Dairy Association. I'm here to testify on behalf of Idaho Dairy Association in opposition of House Bill 753. Our opposition stems from the fact that this grows government, invites costly litigation upon the state, and places unknown fiscal burdens on local communities by attempting to obligate them to enforce immigration law and execute the deportation of individuals without a mechanism to reimburse those communities for those activities. The bill sponsor acknowledged that he didn't even attempt to estimate what those costs would be to our local communities. This bill is also unconstitutional. The plain language of the Constitution places the right, duty, and obligation to regulate immigration and secure our national borders on the federal government. The majority of this committee, the authors, and all 5 co-sponsors of this legislation acknowledge this very point in their vote on House Joint Memorial 11. If you go to page 3 of the provided testimony in your packet, the 3rd paragraph down, you will find text taken directly from House Joint Memorial 11. And again, I'd underscore that within that, it's explicitly acknowledged that the authority lies within the federal government, not the state. The Supreme Court's upheld this a number of times. The enforcement of immigration law rests solely on the federal government. Most recently, in the 2012 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court found in the Arizona v. U.S. decision that this is still true. It's been stated that this legislation is modeled after Texas Senate Bill 4. I draw your attention now to page 5 of the packet of testimony, of written testimony, and go down to paragraph 3. Within that paragraph, you'll see that the Fifth Circuit Court has already been acknowledged by other testifiers that they've put a stay in enforcement on this. And so you have a clear indication that this bill is going to be found unconstitutional. We strongly encourage a no vote on House Bill 753. It attempts to grow government at the expense of Idaho taxpayers, invites unneeded litigation upon the state, places significant unknown financial burdens on local communities, and is clearly unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Are there questions for Rick? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, do you believe that the United States is properly protecting our borders from illegal aliens at this time?
Rick?
Mr. Chair, Representative Skog, I would agree that our United States government is failing on all aspects of immigration policy.
Further questions? Saying none, thank you for your testimony. Oh, I'm sorry. Mark, apologize.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be a little quicker on the draw maybe next time.
Okay.
I actually have, my question really is about the Idaho Dairymen's Association, because I'm not familiar with it. I'm somewhat new here. So does it represent all dairymen in Idaho, or does it primarily represent larger dairies or small family dairies? I'm unclear about where you're coming from.
Rick?
Mr. Chair, Representative Johnson, Idaho Dairymen's Association represents all the dairy farmers within the state of Idaho, and I'd emphasize that they are all family-owned businesses.
All or, oh, sorry.
Just through the chair. Yep.
Yeah. So you're saying all dairies are represented and they're all family-owned?
Rick?
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. We have 2 folks left signed up to testify. First is Estefiana, followed by Robert Norris.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Oh, great. Let me pull up my, sorry, some technical difficulties on my end. But hi, I'm Estefania Mondragon. I am the Executive Director of Poder of Idaho. We advocate for the Latino and immigrant community here in the state. And I am here to testify in opposition of this bill. Being and growing up in Nampa, Idaho, I know firsthand the contributions that the undocumented community provides for the city of Nampa. There are many folks that work in the service industry. They work in the dairies right outside of Nampa. They work in agriculture across the city that now has less and less fields, but in the outskirts of our great city. And a lot of these folks that I know are undocumented. They came into this country without status, but yet contribute to this country in every way. They aren't criminals. I had a great conversation with some leadership from Nampa. We're talking about, there is a lot of misconceptions about undocumented people, and I want to correct that they're criminals. They come here to cause havoc. I would say the majority undocumented people are here to work and contribute in a positive manner to our city and our state. They do pay taxes, although not through not through work, but through traditional means. But they do pay property taxes, right? If they're renting, they are pay property taxes. If they're sales tax. Oh, and I see my time is up. I apologize for that.
No problem. Are there questions? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie, I'm interested in the tax part of what you were talking about, and I'm a little bit unclear. So you're saying they're undocumented. Do they pay an income tax for the work that they do, for the income they receive? And you mentioned they pay taxes through traditional means, and I don't understand what that means. If you could explain that.
Yeah,
Stefiana?
so undocumented immigrants are eligible to get an I-10 number, and that is taken into consideration during employment. So they are able to pay into state and federal taxes.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
Seeing no. Representative Skog has a question for you, Stefania.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman. And Ms. Mondragon, I'm from Nampa, and I'd really like to meet with you after session, discuss these issues sometime.
Yes, I would love to. I actually met with you.
Okay, I thought you're familiar, but I'll continue, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Mondragon, what was the name of your organization? Something of Idaho. I didn't catch it. Could you spell that out for me?
Oh, sorry. I apologize for interrupting you. It is Poder of Idaho, which means power. So it's an acronym for protecting our dreams and empowering resilience.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Ms. Mondragon, I'd like to know what you think of what is happening on the U.S. southern border right now as far as illegal immigration, your personal opinion.
Yeah, I think, what's happening at the border has been 35 years or more in the making since the last, big national push on immigration, right, through Ronald Reagan. So with this amnesty program. So I think there has been a lot of contributing factors within NAFTA that has exacerbated the issue of more folks coming into the United States. What I'm seeing is, what we see in studies is that when we militarize the border, when we have a border that is where it's hard to come in and out, people prefer to stay in, right? Because there's no way to come back home. So let's say I'm from Mexico, I come to the United States, come to work, want to work just for like maybe 3 months, get enough money to come back to my home country, feed my kids and my wife. I'm not able to do that because I have to stay in the country, right? Because of the rigidity of that border. So I'd prefer to stay and just send money back. So what I'm seeing is a fail to identify people and a failure to expand visa programs to allow more workers to flow and come back and forth. I think there is a way to do this. I think that, in Europe, people are able to go across county borders. I think there's a way to document who's coming in and who's coming out. I think we need to put more funds into that, especially since Mexico has been a very good partner in the past with the United States. It's one of our strongest partners in this hemisphere when we're talking international politics.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Next up will be Robert Norris. He's the final person signed up to testify today, unless there's anyone in the audience who would like to testify. Mr. Norris, can you hear us? Okay, go
Hi,
ahead.
Sheriff Robert Norris, Kootenai County. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. We can see you and we can hear you.
All right. My name is Robert Norris. I'm the elected sheriff of Kootenai County, Idaho, and I am begging the legislature to support this bill. I am begging you to give county sheriffs more tools that we can address this illegal immigration. Point of clarification, I think there was a little bit of confusion on Mr. Barbieri's question. We will not contact individuals without probable cause to seek identification. That's a point of clarification that I believe that was unclear. Our southern border is out of control. 99% of my fentanyl can be traced to the southern border. We already passed a fentanyl bill. I'm asking you to support this bill. The cost of doing nothing on illegal immigration will be many times greater than the unknown costs in this bill, period. I promise you. I've seen the trailer, the movie, and the sequel, and it's not good. Illegal immigration has hidden taxes on all of us in every infrastructure that we have, from schools to jails to prisons, medical facilities. It is a hidden tax on every single one of us. So we need more tools to address this problem, and I encourage you to support this bill and vote yes.
Thank you, Sheriff. Are there questions for the Sheriff? Representative Alfieri from Northern Idaho has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Norris, good morning. Thank you for testifying. I wondered if you could talk about the impact of illegal immigration in Kootenai County.
And Sheriff, I apologize. Representative Scott corrected me. It's North Idaho, not Northern Idaho. So apologize for that.
We will forgive him for that transgression. What kind of an impact are we seeing in Kootenai County with illegal immigration, Sheriff?
We are seeing an impact. My foreign national inmate population has quadrupled. We now need translators. We used to need translators for our field personnel and our jail personnel maybe once every 4 months. We're now seeing it once a week. So we are starting to see the impacts of it. Now, some people might say, well, that's not a significant impact, but I promise you, we need to get a handle on this, and we need to protect our borders, and we need to make it comfortable for people who come here illegally and very uncomfortable for people who have come here illegally.
I wonder if he's from Texas.
I'm very much in support of the H1, B1, B2 programs that the federal government has. We have many employers that take advantage of that, but we need more tools in our toolbox against illegal immigration.
Thank you.
Representative Gannon has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Sheriff Norris, are you speaking, is the Idaho Sheriff's Association endorsing this bill?
Well, we have not had an opportunity because of the lateness in the session. So I know I have spoken to many sheriffs and many sheriffs support it, but we have not had a opportunity as a body, as an association, to take a stance and to take a vote on this.
Follow up.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman and Sheriff Norris, have you, what have your discussions been with our our congressional representatives from Idaho? And do they feel they're going to be able to do something about this, or what?
Sheriff?
Oh, no. Our federal contingency does not believe that under this current administration they're going to be doing anything. But here's what I'm doing with my legislators is that we need more tools in the toolbox, and we need to strengthen our laws on forged documents such as driver's license, birth certificates, any forged documents that are likely being used by people who come here illegally. And we need to shore up some of those other areas also. And I'm in constant conversation with our legislators on doing that.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Sheriff Norris, the Congress did just pass a $1.4 trillion budget. And I'm just wondering if what reasons, if there have been any discussions with our congressional representatives as to why they could pass a $1.4 trillion budget, but they can't address immigration reform.
Sheriff?
Well, there's a lot of politics at the federal level. It doesn't cost anything to institute a remain in Mexico policy, period.
And that was a hard question, Sheriff.
Okay. Any further questions, Representative? Seeing none. Sheriff, thank you for being here today. Appreciate it. That That completes all of our public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience today that would like to testify? Just state your name and who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Mariela Diaz. I'm the Idaho ALA chapter chair. I just want to say, that this bill is unconstitutional because of under the Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the federal government has a broad constitutional powers in determining what aliens should be admitted to the United States and not the states. Representative Craig argues that Article 1, Section 10 gives the state power to set rules to protect the border in case of an invasion. However, no such invasion exists between the border of Canada and Idaho. There is no data of that such inflection, so this bill is unconstitutional. In addition, I want to say that this bill mirrors the Texas bill that wanted to pass, and right now is blocked by the 5th Circuit. And I'm sure that this bill is going to block for the 9th Circuit as well. And this is going to be a taxpayer waste of money, because returning all these immigrants to their country is not just going to be by bus. These immigrants come from all over the world. They come from Ukraine, they come from Africa, they come from Korea, they come from all over the world. This is not just a neighbor problem. And this is it, Your Honor.
Way to go. What courage.
You're just fine. Are there questions? Representative Skog has a question.
Thank you, Representative Crane. Two questions, if I may. Would you spell the name of the organization you represent for the record?
Oh, yes. It's the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And I represent the Idaho chapter.
Okay, thank you. And then follow up. You probably see the same television news I do at times, and you see what turns out to be millions of people crossing our southern U.S. border undocumented. Do you see that as an invasion? I do.
I believe that this is a problem of the federal government, not the Idaho taxpayers' money.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And ma'am, I'm just reading here Article 6, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, which you have cited as the reason that you believe that this legislation would be unconstitutional. And I'm just curious, we're speaking of people who are here illegally. So that means that they are not here under the protection of the federal government or under the authorization of the federal government. So I'm just curious, I'm trying to understand how language that says that the Constitution and the laws of the United States are the supreme law of the land, how can language like that be used to protect behavior which is illegal and unconstitutional on its face?
Representative John, I want to disagree with you. The Constitution protects all people, and all of them have due process under the U.S. Constitution and the Article 5 of the Constitution. And this law will be subject to a non-citizen to criminal liability for asserting their due process right. Because what this law is going to prevent is these people go in front of the immigration judge and seek what their countries are denying, which is their protections. And this is under international law. They have the right to seek for an asylum in a foreign country. And if we criminalize people, we're conflicting with the federal court, with the federal laws.
Any further questions? Representative Barbieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, I'm just curious, does your association formally hold a position on whether international borders should be upheld?
Yes, actually, we are in conversations with the federal government on how to protect and how much money to give to the border, and I believe they have some steps in place, but they haven't announced it yet. But we are working on it. The AILA National is working with the government closely. And if you want, I can send you to everybody what these propositions are from AILA National and how to protect our border.
Representative Alfieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam, you mentioned asylum and international laws on asylum. Don't the international laws on asylum, and you mentioned numerous countries where these people are coming from.
Several.
I'm sorry?
There are several.
Yes. Doesn't international asylum law say that the first nation state that person touches is where they should seek asylum? And if that is the case, someone coming from, for example, Ukraine, unless they flew directly to the United States, would be violating those asylum laws?
That is incorrect. Well, it's partially correct. However, we can argue it's not necessarily the first country that they touch. They could also refugee in other countries before they come to the United States. Sometimes they wait 1, 2, 3, 5 years in other countries, and that doesn't prevent them from applying asylum in this case in the United States or another country.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And ma'am, so now I'm a little confused because my understanding of it was that the first country that they go to is where they have to apply for asylum. Are you telling me that is not the case?
You're wrong, sir.
Yes and no. There are arguments around that. That's what I would say.
Okay. Representative Young, committee, just be aware we've got about 15 minutes and we've still got 2 more issues we need to take up. So,
thank you, everyone.
We're good? Okay. Representative Young's okay. Thank you for your testimony today. Anyone else in the audience like to testify on House Bill 753? Seeing none, Representative Crane will give you a couple of minutes here to wrap up.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm just going to go over a couple of things that were brought up and some rebuttals back to those. First, we're constantly told that people illegally entering the country are undocumented immigrants, and the federal government has jurisdiction over all matters concerning immigration. This is not the case. In fact, the word immigration doesn't appear in our U.S. Constitution. The only general power granted to the federal government concerning aliens in times of peace is the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. So I would point that out to the committee. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 states that states have the power to engage in war when actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit delay. And my question would be, how could the states have the power to engage in war independent of the federal government but not have the civil authority to protect the border? This land that we are in, this is our state. This is our state land. We have an absolute right to do that. Representative Gannon brought up, do we have any funding in here to defend our laws? The legislative fund already exists to defend our laws in constitutional challenges, so we don't include possible legal challenges in our fiscal notes on legislation. I think it's great that people want to come to this state and that they want to come to this country. It's the greatest land in the world, but they need to come here legally. That's what I'm advocating for. I'm for pro-legal immigration, not illegal. I think what Sheriff Norris indicated is he needs tools in the toolbox, and that's what we are giving our law enforcement. This is our land, this is our border, and we have a constitutional right to protect it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Crane. Are there questions for Representative Crane? I've got Representative Gannon, Scott, and then Palmer.
Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Crane. So we've heard testimony today, and there's been reference to this invasion term and the Canadian border. Do we have any document whatsoever, any report of any kind showing the nature and extent of illegal immigration through Idaho's border with Canada?
Representative Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Gannon. I did not bring my statistics today. I had a document that I was going to print off from the Homeland Security regarding how many apprehensions and how many people have been encountered at the border. It primarily covered the southern border. I would be happy to grab that information should this make it to the floor with a due pass recommendation and bring that to the floor and cover in my debate how many people are coming through the northern border as well. Absolutely.
Representative Scott.
I want to make a motion to send House Bill 753 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Okay, committee, we have a motion to send House Bill 753 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Is there discussion on that motion? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my concern is with this concept of invasion, because that's what's in the Constitution, and that was the basis for the Texas legislation, as I understand it, which it appears that the Fifth Circuit is not buying into, at least at the moment. And so in order to have a legal basis for this, I think you have to have an invasion from some neighboring area, neighboring country, and that would be Canada. Is the only border we have with a foreign country. So I'm really concerned about the legality of this particular legislation.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, the motion is to send House Bill 753 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. It will be done. Would you like to be recorded as voting no? Representative Gannon on the record voting no against House Bill 753. Next, committee will take up RS 3.